Now, I've got a tough crowd here, but we're going to have to chew on this and a few other things. Let's bring in our all-star ensemble, Miranda Devine, Ace New York Post columnist and Fox News contributor. Caroline Downey is back, National Review columnist, and the great Charlie Hurt, who is also co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. Thanks to all of you. I know you're stunned by this. I'm just saying, Charlie, I'll start with you. This is very important, this $200 billion request. And it's going to generate a lot of Democratic opposition. They're going to use it, right, as a platform to moan and groan and whine with all the usual nonsensical arguments, all right? But GOP's got to fight back. It will not get 60 votes. Right. Fetterman will be the only Democrat that helps, okay? We might even lose a Republican along the way. So therefore, I want a reconciliation bill. There's now discussion is starting. Mike Johnson, the Speaker, is on this track. I'm trying to urge people to start thinking about it. The senators, Republican senators, so far are not touching it, but we must. We have to get the military appropriation. We must get it, and we're not going to get it with 60 votes on the floor. So reconciliation is the way to do it. And we can talk about the Voting Rights Act in a minute, but let's start with this.
So, I think that it's amazing to look at all the ways that President Trump has rewritten all the rules of politics in Washington. And there's no rule that is more set in stone than the rule that in an election year, Congress never accomplishes anything. And so that is the biggest hill that has to be climbed to do this, would be actually accomplishing something in a year that you have an election. None of these cowards ever wants to do that. But what you just laid out is, I would say, the only way, the only hope of getting any of these things done, let alone all of them done. And I think it's really interesting, we're not having a debate about this right now, or Congress is not having a debate about the war right now. This is a policy, the policy of preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon has been the position of every single president going back to before Jimmy Carter. And of both parties. And the idea that I wish Democrats would just come out and say, and defend the idea of letting Iran have a nuclear weapon. But they're not even having that debate. And so not only are they not getting anything done, they're not even actually debating this issue. All they're saying over and over again is that they hate Donald Trump and they don't want Donald Trump to have a victory.
I have to believe that's true. It's so unfortunate. But I think your logic is, and Miranda, the sub argument. I mean, what Charlie said is that's exactly right. At the end of the day, that's what they want. Stop Trump on it. But the sub argument is Iran is no imminent danger. And that is just nonsense. And I use the Witkoff example because it was true. He came back and narrated what he heard at the last meeting, which proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that A, Iran has the nuclear capability. They may not have the delivery yet, but they will soon. And B, they don't want to make peace. They never wanted to make peace. They weren't going to change their minds ever, even though we tried to make a deal. No, Trump tried 10 times to make a deal, and they wouldn't do it. So that's going to be, these are the arguments that are going to be made.
Yeah, I mean, it's a semantic argument. What is the meaning of the word imminent? And it means different things to different people, depending on whether they've got TDS or if they're just being sensible. And I think, the good news is Israel just said yesterday that they've degraded Iran's ability to enrich uranium and to create these ballistic missiles. So that's good. And it's now inch by inch. And the idea that the Democrats, which they will try to deny the military the money they need. As Pete Hegseth says, you need money, it costs money to kill bad guys. And I mean, Iran's not the only game in town. And I mean, how many Democrats had Ukrainian flags in their bios and have been waving Ukrainian flags at the State of the Union? I mean, Ukraine needs some of that money as well if America's going to continue to help. And John Fetterman said the other day that the leader of the Democratic Party at the moment is Trump derangement syndrome. And that's it. They are completely irresponsible. They've defunded the TSA. We've got these massive queues at every airport. It's dangerous. And I really think that Democrats would be quite happy for Americans to get harmed, for American personnel in the military to get harmed, just to advance their cause. And their cause is to beat Donald Trump, and they have nothing else.
And they're presidents who signed on, Caroline, to the idea that Iran's a terrorist state and the biggest state sponsor of terrorism, and that, yes, there's a nuclear threat. I mean, Democrats have been saying that for years. Obama said it. Biden said it. I mean, you can probably go all the way back to Jimmy Carter. But they never did anything about it. Bill Clinton didn't do anything about it. Obama didn't do anything about it. Biden didn't do anything about it. Republican presidents really didn't do anything about it. Donald Trump is doing something about it. Now, he needs a couple of $100 billion to complete the war mission, all right, and keep our, military might. And there may be, by the way, some add-ons for Ukraine. Nobody's even talking about Ukraine at the moment. But I'm just looking at this. Hegseth, whatever the number is, Democrats will oppose it. Republicans must get this through. This is a debate the GOP cannot lose. You cannot lose. They've staked a position on it, and they cannot lose. So I'm just saying, putting my little hat on, I've been in the budget department, I ran the NEC, I've done all this stuff down through the years. Reconciliation's the only way to do it. Stop even, I don't want to hear any other ideas appropriate. 50 votes will be a miracle. 50 plus Vance, right? It'll be a miracle. Forget 60. Just forget about it. And let's get serious, because the servicemen and women need the money. They must be supported.
Yeah. I just want to add to what Miranda said. They hate Trump's Iran episode even more so because he is the anti-Obama. He overturned Obama's legacy of accommodating and kowtowing to the Iranian regime, so much so that we literally handed them pallets of cash. But I agree with you on the reconciliation bill, Larry. And what I'll say is that I reject Hakeem Jeffries' false choice and zero-sum game thinking here that, oh, well, the way to improve kitchen table issues in the economy is to take that $200 billion that you want to invest in the Iranian war and to apply it to social programs. That's how progressives think, and that always becomes a boondoggle. If someone's subsidizing it, then someone's probably robbing it, as the fraud in California and Minnesota have shown. So I just think they're going at this the wrong way. And to your point about why the investment in the military is needed more than ever, we have decimated much of Iran's traditional military, right? But there's still several thousand sea mines, drones, fast boats. That's why the Strait of Hormuz is being held hostage right now, is because we have to take back control of that, and that's going to require a lot of advanced military capacity. We have anti-sea mine countermeasures. We have helicopters that are about to go into retirement. We shouldn't put them into retirement. So all of this requires prudence and money, like you said, Miranda. And I think they don't understand the stakes clearly of what's going on.
And I'm going to get into trouble on this. I've tried this with a few senators, but I'm going to keep up. While we're doing this reconciliation is a wonderful thing. In the main, it can be whatever you want it to be. All right, there's a lovely woman who's a parliamentarian, but whatever, it can. I'm telling you, you have to sort of reimagine it every time, and it gets larger and larger. Okay, fine. The main thing for the GOP is you only need 50 votes, plus Vance. Okay, now, Charlie, nobody wants to touch this, but I'm going to push it. You have the Saving America Act, the voting rights bill, okay? We must get this through. It is so very, very important, all right? The president is right. After Iran, this is probably the most important thing. And here we have a chance to do both of them in reconciliation. Now, 2 senators this week have already told me it's not a fiscal package, so we can't do it. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. When we closed the border, we had to put a lot of money in. We had to invest a lot of money, right? You would say border security, no way in reconciliation. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. If we're going to enforce new voting rights rules, I mean, the states run the election, but the rulemaking, which is what's going on here, photo ID, citizenship, et cetera, that will require money. That will, in order to secure our voting, just like securing the border, it's going to require a fair amount of money to enforce this. Money Well, that's reconciliation. Sure. You have to be more creative. You have to stop thinking about old lines. The guys I talk, come on, reimagine reconciliation. It's a wonderful thing. It's so good that I want to cut the capital gains tax too, along with the Pentagon and the voting rights bill. Honest to goodness, I want that too.
Not too much. Don't be greedy.
All right, I don't have to be greedy. So Charlie, anyway, I'm pushing this.
But it's
People think I'm nuts.
true. No, well, I mean, look at the past reconciliations. They've always, as you point out, they've always been bizarre zebra giraffes, whatever they want them to be. But also, the other thing about the voting rights is the fact that the other element here that Democrats want so bad is to, in order to goose the population of all these areas like sanctuary cities that are losing voters because people don't want to live under Democrat rule anymore, and they're trying to maintain their congressional districts. And again, a lot of that touches on welfare. It touches on the fraud that we're seeing in places like California and in Minnesota. And so, yeah, I mean, sounds fiscal to me.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it's totally. Look, they're using. I read the New York Post story was such a seminal story. It was a long story, but basically the gist of it was not just that illegal immigrants are figuring out illegal ways to vote. Yes, but also people here legally with a legal visa, but not citizens, are voting. You can't do that. No. You can camp out here if you got a visa, green card, whatever. You can't vote. I'm sorry. But there's hundreds of thousands that have been voting. Now, somebody has to police. First of all, we need the legislation. Somebody has to police that, and that requires, wait for it, money.
Yes.
And that fits into, hang on a second, reconciliation. That's my whole argument.
Sing it all. Yeah.
I want to see these senators. Come on, they have to think outside the box.
Why are they resistant? I mean, they're Republicans, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Hello. Help me out here, Caroline.
Yeah, well, I'll just say.
Yes, they are Republican. The answer is absolutely yes. But sometimes they do strange, sleep-filled things. I don't know.
Well, I heard originally, I was on Capitol Hill recently, and they were saying, we don't have the votes for the SAVE Act. We don't have the votes, sorry. And I was like, is that really the most creative thinking you can do here? That's it, we're gonna throw up our hands, we can't get this election integrity bill passed, which I understand, a good chunk of MAGA thinks this is a deal breaker for them.
No.
I mean, they support Trump's Iran mission wholeheartedly, unlike what the folks on Twitter are saying, but the SAVE Act is pretty much a requirement for them. So it has to get done, and I think this is a very innovative way to do it.
Look, people told me a year ago, first of all, they wanted 3 reconciliations. I argued every night. I took on almost every member of the Senate. You got to have one reconciliation. That's right. Trump knew this. Mike Johnson knew this. Anyway, eventually the senators knew it too. But they said, wait, the border, that's not a fiscal thing. Yeah, it is. It costs money to police the border. Well, it costs money to police an election, at least for the rulemaking. All right, we got a last one. I want to ask you, Miranda. Stories in the paper today. Mr. Trump is telling his inner circle that the mass deportations are going too far. We shouldn't use that word anymore. We should call them criminals. But basically, Senator Moen, the new DHS secretary to be, Tom Homan and others just want a softer. I don't know how to just keep it up. Just go for the criminals. Change the wording. Just kind of a pullback on this whole campaign. What do you make of that?
We haven't heard that from Donald Trump. That's a leak from someone, in the inner sanctum, supposedly, according to I think it was the Washington Post. And I think that's people around Trump trying to shape him because they see that immigration turned bad for him in the polls after those, the deaths in Minnesota. So I think this is just the White House with its eye on the midterms and just trying to soften the blow. And I think, I don't know if Mark Wayne Mullen is the right guy, but obviously Kristi Noem wasn't. That wasn't working out. And, I don't think Donald Trump's changed his mind about illegal migrants. Why would he? I don't think anyone in a MAGA or any sensible American wants to continue to have illegal migrants, particularly criminals, and people who are have in their very first act lied and tricked the system. So, at least remove the ones that came in under Biden, and I think that's what everybody wants. It's probably never going to happen, but that aim should not be restricted, because the lower your ambition, the less your achievements.
Can I just say that I think the management style, though, is something that could have been changed to be a little bit less optics, spectacle. I think he can still fulfill his mandate of mass deportations, not just violent criminals, but anyone here illegally, but not do it in such a flashy way. I think that was his criticism of what happened under the tenure of Kristi Noem.
Charlie, it'd be just great. He's got to pull together on all these issues so he can easily win the third term.
And only Donald Trump can manage to keep all of these balls in the air at the same time.
Of course he can.
And on the immigration thing, you're either a nation of laws or you're not. We are. Trump believes in us being a nation of laws, so you have to enforce the law. And one thing that I think is really interesting, proof that Democrats don't actually care about any humans. They like the open border because you never, nobody, among the people who fare poorly under an open border are illegals and migrants, and legal migrants, including legal migrants. And they don't care about any of these people. But if you want to have a calmer discussion about all of it, remove the emergency aspect of it and seal the border. And Donald Trump did that on day one.
You bet you. And people like it a lot.
Yeah.
I guess I got to get out. It's very good. I had other things to talk about, but we'll get to it another time.